It's August 12th, 2025, and the battlefield around Pokrovsk has changed in a way that could reshape the war. Overnight, Russian forces have broken through the Ukrainian defensive line in the Dobropolye sector along the Novoye direction. This isn't just another gain on the map. It's a rare strategic opening, one that could allow Moscow to completely shift the focus of its offensive, catch Ukraine off balance, and potentially collapse the Eastern Front. The breakthrough. The advance was led by the 51st Guards Combined Arms Army of the Russian Armed Forces. Ukrainian sources and Western intelligence confirm that Russian infantry infiltrated the front line in Dobropolye under the cover of darkness, exploiting gaps and weak points before heavier mechanized units pushed through. This wasn't a gradual erosion of the line. It was a deliberate breach. Russian reconnaissance units identified vulnerabilities, artillery softened defensive positions, and then infantry slipped through under minimal detection. By the time Ukrainian commanders realized the scope of the attack, Russian forces had already driven forward in depth, securing territory that now places them in a position to choose their next major direction of attack. A rare strategic window. Here's why this matters. Up until now, most analysts expected Russia's next major push in this sector to be northeast, towards the urban strongholds of Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. These cities are heavily fortified, central to Ukraine's eastern defense, and symbolic after years of fighting. But this breach near Pokrovsk opens a different, potentially more devastating option: a pivot westward towards Pavlohrad. Why Pavlohrad? Because it's a logistical artery. It's not just another town. It's a hub in the Dnipropetrovsk region that supports Ukrainian forces all along the front. If Russia drives hard in that direction, it doesn't just take ground. It forces Ukraine to defend two existential threats at once. The checkmate scenario. Let's break that down. If Russian forces push west towards Pavlohrad, they could threaten the strategic rear of Ukrainian units in Dnipropetrovsk, sever supply routes, and cut rail lines that move troops and equipment from the heart of Ukraine to the eastern battlefields. At the same time, that westward push could still create a trap for Ukrainian units holding Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. By cutting supply lines from the south and west, those forces could be encircled. It's the kind of dual threat scenario military planners dread, where defending one front leaves the other fatally exposed. Western analysts are already describing this as a potential checkmate position for the Ukrainian command if Russia can maintain the initiative. Ukrainian dilemmas. The question now is whether Ukraine has the reserves, both in manpower and heavy equipment, to counter a sudden change in Russia's main axis of attack. To respond effectively, Ukraine would need to redeploy forces quickly without leaving other sectors exposed. But multiple reports suggest that Ukrainian defensive lines are already stretched thin. Infantry units have been cycling through rotations at an exhausting pace. Equipment shortages remain a constant problem, especially in artillery ammunition and armored vehicles. Compounding this, there are credible reports of internal command problems. Misleading situation reports from field units have led to delays in recognizing Russian penetrations until it's too late to mount a coordinated counterattack. In a war of maneuver, those delays are lethal. Russian tactics and adaptation. Russia's approach in this sector reflects a broader adaptation in its operational style. Instead of relying solely on massive, grinding assaults, Russian units have increasingly used infiltration tactics. Small, mobile groups slipping through gaps, avoiding large-scale detection, and then opening the way for follow-on forces. This approach is harder to counter than traditional mechanized thrusts because it forces defenders to maintain a continuous, tightly held front line. Any thinly defended area becomes an entry point. Without sufficient reserves, Ukraine has to gamble on where to reinforce, and in this case, Russia found the weak spot. What comes next? So what happens now? If Russia chooses the Pavlohrad route, the clock starts ticking for Ukraine. Moving enough troops to block that advance would require stripping forces from elsewhere, and every stripped sector becomes vulnerable to Russian exploitation. If instead Russia sticks with the more predictable push towards Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, they could still benefit from this breach by pressuring Ukraine from multiple directions. But analysts note that the westward pivot is the more dangerous and potentially decisive move. The next 72 hours will be critical. Look for signs of Russian logistical movements west of the breach. Watch for Ukrainian reserves redeploying in haste, and listen for reports from Pavlohrad itself. If Russia makes contact there, the battle for the Eastern Front could enter an entirely new phase. The Pokrovsk breakthrough may not yet be a turning point, but it's one of the clearest windows Russia has had in months to force a strategic collapse. Whether they can exploit it, and whether Ukraine can respond in time, will shape the war's next chapter. In this kind of maneuver warfare, the difference between an opportunity and a disaster is often measured in days, sometimes in hours. Stay informed on the world's shifting power. Subscribe to the Watchtower Report, where strategy meets reality.